Welcome to this CA Final FEMA Revision Series. In this session, we'll cover one of the most exam-relevant areas under FEMA: export of goods and services, realization and repatriation of export proceeds, authorized persons, and penalties for noncompliance. We'll simplify the provisions, focus on important limits, filing procedures, approval requirements, and penalty frameworks. By the end of this revision, you'll have a complete understanding of Regulations 3 to 13 and Sections 8, 10, 13, and 14. Let's begin with the fundamental principle that governs foreign exchange realization under FEMA. The starting point is Section 8 of FEMA. Whenever foreign exchange becomes due or accrues to a resident in India, that person must take all reasonable steps to realize and bring that foreign exchange back into India within the period and manner specified by RBI. The philosophy behind this provision is simple. Foreign exchange is considered a valuable national resource, and therefore exporters cannot keep export earnings indefinitely outside India. FEMA expects timely realization and repatriation so that the country's foreign exchange resources remain available for economic activities and international obligations. Before exporting goods or software outside India, exporters are generally required to furnish a prescribed declaration. This requirement applies to exports made outside India, except to Nepal and Bhutan through specified channels. If the export value is known, the full export value must be declared. If the value cannot be accurately determined at the time of export, the expected market value must be stated along with an undertaking that the full value will be realized. In third-party export arrangements, where payment is expected from someone other than the buyer, that fact must also be disclosed. For certain service exports where no specific declaration form exists, exports may proceed without declaration, but realization and repatriation obligations continue to apply. Not every export requires a declaration. FEMA provides several practical exemptions. Trade samples and publicity materials supplied free of cost are exempt. Personal effects of travelers are also exempt. Goods sent abroad for testing and intended to be re-imported do not require declaration. Replacement goods supplied free of charge under the foreign trade policy also qualify. One important exam point is gifts. Goods exported as gifts up to 5 lakh rupees are exempt, subject to the prescribed declaration. Another frequently tested exemption relates to aircraft, engines, and spare parts sent abroad for repairs or overhaul. These must generally be re-imported within 6 months from the date of export. FEMA prescribes different filing procedures depending on the nature of export. For export of goods, Form EDF is used. It is submitted in duplicate to customs. After authentication, the original is forwarded to RBI, while the duplicate is returned to the exporter for submission to the authorized dealer bank. For software exports, Form Softex is used. It is submitted in triplicate to designated authorities in STPI, FTZ, or SEZ units. One copy goes to RBI, another to the exporter, and the third is retained for records. A very important compliance requirement is that the Importer-Exporter Code, or IEC, must be mentioned on all declaration forms and related correspondence. One of the most important numerical provisions in FEMA relates to realization timelines. The general rule is that export proceeds must be realized and repatriated within 9 months from the date of export. Where goods are exported to an overseas warehouse established with RBI approval, the period extends to 15 months from the date of shipment. Another important compliance requirement is the 21-day rule. Export documents must be submitted to the authorized dealer within 21 days from the date of export. In software exports, the period is calculated from the date of Softex certification. RBI and authorized dealers may grant extensions where sufficient reasons exist. Sometimes, overseas buyers make advance payments before shipment. FEMA permits this, but imposes strict conditions. The exporter must generally complete shipment within 1 year from the date of receiving the advance. Any interest payable on the advance cannot exceed 100 basis points above LIBOR or any benchmark specified by RBI. Another critical requirement is that all shipment documents must be routed through the same authorized dealer who received the advance payment. If the exporter fails to ship the goods within 1 year, refund of the advance or payment of interest beyond that period requires prior RBI approval, unless the export agreement itself provides for a longer shipment schedule. To ensure timely realization of export proceeds, RBI has the power to impose additional conditions on exports. For example, RBI may require exports to be backed by an irrevocable letter of credit or prior approval from an authorized dealer. However, before imposing such restrictions, exporters must be given a reasonable opportunity to present their case. Another important area is project exports. These include deferred payment exports, turnkey projects, and civil construction contracts abroad. Such transactions generally require prior approval from the approving authority, which may be either Exim Bank of India or an authorized dealer. Performance guarantees may also be issued in connection with these projects. Section 10 introduces the concept of authorized persons. These include authorized dealers, money changers, offshore banking units, and other persons authorized by RBI to deal in foreign exchange. A favorite exam point relates to offshore banking units, or OBUs. Although OBUs are authorized persons, they are not treated as authorized dealers under FEMA. They operate from special economic zones and cannot undertake transactions directly with residents in India. Authorized persons have important responsibilities. They must obtain declarations and information from customers and refuse transactions where adequate information is not provided or where a FEMA violation is suspected. RBI also has the power to revoke authorization in cases of non-compliance or public interest. Section 13 contains the general penalty framework under FEMA. Where the amount involved in the contravention can be determined, the penalty may extend up to 3 times the sum involved. If the amount cannot be quantified, the penalty may extend up to 2 lakh rupees. For continuing contraventions, an additional penalty of up to 5,000 rupees per day may be imposed after the first day. Another important power is available to the Adjudicating Authority, which can order confiscation of currency, securities, or property connected with the violation. These provisions ensure that FEMA compliance is taken seriously by all participants in foreign exchange transactions. FEMA imposes especially strict consequences for unauthorized acquisition of foreign exchange, foreign securities, or immovable property outside India beyond prescribed limits. The financial penalty can extend up to 3 times the amount involved. In addition, authorities may confiscate equivalent assets situated in India. What makes this provision particularly serious is the criminal element. Under Section 13, 1c, such contraventions may also result in imprisonment of up to 5 years along with a fine. Therefore, unlike ordinary FEMA violations that are generally civil in nature, these specific foreign asset violations carry much more severe consequences. The final provision deals with enforcement of penalties. If a person fails to pay a FEMA penalty within 90 days from the notice of payment, civil imprisonment may follow. Where the amount payable exceeds 1 crore rupees, imprisonment can extend up to 3 years. In other cases, it may extend up to 6 months. Before ordering arrest, the adjudicating authority must issue a show cause notice and record satisfaction that the person has concealed assets or has the means to pay but deliberately refuses. However, where there is a risk of absconding or evading recovery, an immediate arrest warrant may be issued. This highlights FEMA's strong enforcement mechanism against willful defaulters. Welcome to this CA Final FEMA Revision session on Adjudication, Appeals, and Enforcement. In the previous discussions, we covered export regulations and penalties. Now we move into what happens after a contravention is detected. We'll understand how FEMA ensures compliance through adjudication, recovery proceedings, appeals, compounding of offenses, and enforcement powers. This chapter is highly scoring because it revolves around timelines, authorities, officer ranks, and procedural requirements. Keep a close eye on all the numbers discussed in this revision because they are frequently tested in examinations. Think of FEMA enforcement as a complete legal journey. It starts with investigation and enforcement, moves to adjudication, allows settlement through compounding, provides multiple appellate remedies, and finally enables recovery of penalties. The framework consists of arrest and detention provisions, recovery of arrears, compounding mechanisms, adjudication procedures, appellate forums, and the Directorate of Enforcement. Each authority has a specific role and timeline. Understanding the sequence is important because many students memorize provisions individually but forget how they connect together. In this session, we'll build that complete picture step by step. Suppose a person ignores notices issued by the adjudicating authority and refuses to appear. In such a case, the adjudicating authority can issue a warrant of arrest. Once arrested, FEMA provides an important safeguard. The arrested person must be produced before the adjudicating authority within 24 hours of arrest. However, the time required for travel from the place of arrest to the authority is excluded from this calculation. This rule ensures fairness and prevents arbitrary detention. For exam purposes, remember the sequence clearly. Notice, failure to appear, arrest warrant, arrest, and production before the authority within 24 hours. FEMA also provides an opportunity for immediate release. If the arrested person pays the amount mentioned in the warrant together with the costs of arrest to the arresting officer, release must be granted immediately. Another important provision applies to Hindu undivided families. Where the default relates to an HUF, the Carta is deemed to be the defaulter for enforcement purposes. This means responsibility under arrest and detention provisions falls on the Carta. This is a favorite examiner point because students often remember company liability but overlook HUF liability. Before committing a person to civil prison, the adjudicating authority must provide an opportunity to explain why detention should not be ordered. This is known as the show cause opportunity. During the inquiry, the authority may either keep the person in custody or release them upon furnishing adequate security. Additionally, FEMA allows a special 15-day opportunity before a detention order is finalized. During this period, the defaulter may clear the arrears and avoid further consequences. The objective is recovery of dues rather than punishment alone. Now comes one of the most important numerical provisions under FEMA. If the amount demanded exceeds 1 crore rupees, detention in civil prison may extend up to 3 years. In all other cases, detention may extend up to 6 months. Remember that these are maximum limits. The detained person can secure release earlier by paying the amount specified in the warrant. A simple memory trick is, above 1 crore equals 3 years. All other cases equal 6 months. This number combination frequently appears in MCQs and case study questions. An important misconception is that release from civil prison eliminates liability. That is not true. Even after release, the outstanding arrears continue to remain payable. However, FEMA provides one protection. The person cannot be arrested again under the same recovery certificate. Another practical aspect is execution of detention orders. Such orders can be executed anywhere in India, according to the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973. Therefore, merely changing cities or states does not help a defaulter escape enforcement proceedings. If a person fails to pay a penalty imposed under Section 13 within 90 days from receiving the notice, recovery proceedings can begin. The adjudicating authority may authorize an enforcement officer to recover the arrears. However, the officer must not be below the rank of assistant director. Once authorized, the officer enjoys powers similar to those available to income tax authorities for tax recovery under the Income Tax Act. This provision gives FEMA a strong recovery mechanism by leveraging established tax recovery procedures. Compounding is a mechanism that allows FEMA contraventions to be settled without prolonged litigation. The power is exercised by authorized officers of the RBI, Enforcement Directorate, and persons authorized by the central government. The most important exam point is the timeline. The application must be disposed of within 180 days from the date it is received. Once a contravention is compounded, no fresh proceeding can be initiated, and any existing proceeding relating to that contravention cannot continue. Compounding, therefore, provides certainty, finality, and quicker dispute resolution. A landmark judgment in this area is Sterlite Industries India Limited versus Special Director of Enforcement, Mumbai. The court clarified the true effect of compounding under FEMA. It held that once a contravention has been compounded, authorities cannot initiate or continue proceedings relating to that same contravention. In simple terms, compounding acts like a legal closure mechanism. The matter stands settled. This case is important because it reinforces the finality and effectiveness of the compounding process under FEMA. The adjudicating authority is appointed by the central government to conduct inquiries into FEMA contraventions. Proceedings begin when an authorized officer files a written complaint. During the inquiry, the authority must provide a reasonable opportunity of being heard. If there is concern that the person may abscond or evade payment, a bond or guarantee may be demanded. One critical examination point is the disposal target. The authority should endeavor to dispose of the complaint within 1 year from its receipt. If this is not possible, reasons for delay must be recorded in writing. The first appellate level is the Special Director Appeals. This authority hears appeals only against orders passed by an assistant director or deputy director, acting as an adjudicating authority. Appeals must generally be filed within 45 days from receiving the order. However, if sufficient cause for delay is shown, the authority may condone the delay and admit the appeal. Remember the jurisdiction carefully because many students confuse the appellate structure under FEMA. The next level is the Appellate Tribunal constituted under SAFEMA 1976. It acts as FEMA's tribunal and hears appeals against orders of the Special Director Appeals as well as certain adjudicating authorities. The appeal must be filed within 45 days from receipt of the order. The tribunal should endeavor to dispose of the appeal within 180 days. If disposal takes longer, written reasons for the delay must be recorded. These timelines are highly testable and should be remembered carefully. The final appellate stage under FEMA is the High Court. However, an appeal is allowed only on a question of law arising from the order of the appellate tribunal. Pure factual disputes generally cannot be challenged. The appeal must be filed within 60 days from communication of the decision. If sufficient cause exists, a further extension of 60 days may be granted. Therefore, the maximum possible period becomes 120 days. A useful memory sequence is 45 days, 45 days, and then 60 plus 60 days. The Directorate of Enforcement is the principal enforcement agency under FEMA. It is established by the central government and is responsible for investigation and enforcement activities. The director, additional director, special director, and deputy director have powers relating to appointments and supervision. One crucial exam point is that only officers not below the rank of assistant director can undertake investigations relating to Section 13 contraventions. The central government may also authorize customs officers, excise officers, police officers, and other officials to exercise certain enforcement powers. FEMA contains certain legal presumptions regarding documents. When authenticated documents are produced, seized, or received from outside India, the signatures and handwriting are presumed genuine unless proven otherwise. Such documents are admissible as evidence even if not duly stamped. Additionally, the contents of foreign documents are presumed true unless disproved. FEMA also empowers the central government, in public interest, to suspend or relax provisions of the Act either indefinitely or for a specified period. However, such notifications must be placed before Parliament for oversight and review. When a company commits a FEMA contravention, liability extends beyond the company itself. Every person responsible for conducting the company's business at the time of contravention is also deemed guilty. Furthermore, directors, managers, secretaries, or officers may become personally liable if the contravention occurred because of their consent, connivance, or negligence. However, they can defend themselves by proving that the contravention occurred without their knowledge, or that they exercised due diligence to prevent it. The burden of proving this defense rests on them. Finally, FEMA clarifies that proceedings do not automatically end because a person dies or becomes insolvent. Rights, obligations, and liabilities continue and pass to legal representatives, official receivers, or assignees. However, the liability of legal representatives is limited to the value of the estate inherited by them. FEMA also protects public authorities acting in good faith. No suit, prosecution, or legal proceeding can be initiated against the central government, RBI, or authorized officers for actions performed honestly under the Act. This provision ensures that officials can discharge their duties without fear of unnecessary litigation.